I trusted my cousin enough to make him shop manager. He used that trust to add himself to my business account and quietly drain $194,600 over 14 months. My own aunt told him he was entitled to every dollar. I never thought I'd be pressing felony charges against my own blood. But when I sat in Marcus Webley's office, staring at 14 months of bank statements, $194,600 gone, bled out in transfers disguised as vendor payments. Something in me went cold. Not angry, cold. My cousin Derek, the guy I'd trusted to manage my shop, the guy I'd vouched for when nobody else would hire him, had been draining my business account like it was his personal ATM. And the worst part? He didn't even think he was stealing. He thought he was collecting what the family was owed. Let me back up. I grew up in Texas City, just north of Galveston. Blue collar all the way down. My dad was a pipe fitter. My mom worked at a seafood processing plant off Palmer Highway for 23 years. Nobody in my family owned a business. You punched a clock, you brought home a check, and you were grateful for it. That was the deal. I got my first marine diesel certification at 19. Spent the next 6 years turning wrenches at other people's yards. Morgan's Point, Pelican Island, anywhere that serviced offshore supply vessels and needed a body willing to crawl into an engine room at 5 in the morning. 14-hour days in compartments that hit 130 degrees. You'd sweat through your coveralls by 7 a.m. and just keep going. I loved it. Every seized piston, every corroded injector, every job that some other mechanic had walked away from. I learned the work by doing the work. Now here's the part that haunts everything. My Uncle Ray, that's Derek's father, he passed away 6 years ago. Cancer. But before that, back when I was 25, he introduced me to a guy named Captain Jim Hollis at a family crawfish boil. Hollis ran a fleet of offshore supply boats out of Galveston. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. He had a turbocharger going bad on one of his crew boats. I told him I could rebuild it. He said, "Prove it." That was a $4,200 job. One contract, one handshake at a folding table covered in newspaper and crawfish shells. That was 9 years ago. From that single job, I clawed my way up. I rented a single bay off Harborside Drive. Nothing fancy. Concrete floor, one lift, a coffee maker that barely worked. I reinvested every dollar. Took my USCG facility certification exam. Failed it once. Passed it the second time. Within 5 years, I had a full yard, 6 employees, and active contracts with 3 fleet operators running supply boats between Galveston and the deepwater platforms. My operating reserves hit $287,000. That sounds like a lot until you understand what it actually is. Insurance deposits, parts inventory floats, payroll buffer for the slow months when weather shuts down offshore work. Every cent was accounted for, or so I thought. Derek is 2 years younger than me, 32. He'd bounced between jobs his whole adult life. Warehouse work in League City, a failed run at getting his real estate license, a DUI that cost him a driving gig with a logistics company. Good guy at a barbecue, terrible guy in a workplace. But Aunt Lorraine, his mother, and Uncle Ray's widow, she called me one night, practically in tears. "He just needs someone to believe in him," she said. "Your family. You're the only one doing well enough to help." So I hired him, shop manager, 18 months ago. I trained him on the invoicing system, the vendor contacts, the scheduling. He was charming with clients, shook hands like he meant it, but he was sloppy with the paperwork. Invoices filed 3 days late, vendor names I didn't recognize popping up on purchase orders. I chalked it up to him learning the ropes. The family pressure to give him time was constant. Every Sunday dinner, Lorraine would ask how Derek was doing at the shop, and the whole table would wait for my answer like it was some kind of test. That's when Lorraine started with the comments. Little jabs between bites of pot roast. "Must be nice having all that money." And then the sharper ones. "Ray always said you'd never have made it without his connections." I'd smile and change the subject. Figured it was jealousy. Figured it was grief, twisting into something ugly. I told myself it didn't matter because I knew the truth. I'd earned what I had. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was especially wrong about how much those comments actually meant. Then one Tuesday morning, my bookkeeper, Priya, walked into my office, closed the door behind her, and said 5 words that changed everything. Derek is on the account. Priya Chandran had been doing my books for 3 years. Quiet, meticulous, the kind of person who flags a $12 discrepancy and won't let it go until she finds where it landed. She'd been reconciling quarterly accounts when she caught it. A second signatory on my business checking account at Moody National Bank. Derek's name. Added 7 months after I hired him. I never authorized it. I never even knew. She pulled 3 months of statements and found 17 transfers to an account she couldn't match to any vendor on file. $8,400, $11,200, $6,750. Always just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. Always coded as marine parts supplier or subcontractor payment. She cross-referenced every single transfer against actual purchase orders. Not one matched. The total she'd found in just those 3 months was $73,000. She told me there were likely more going back further. My hands were shaking when I picked up the phone. I didn't call Derek. I called an attorney. Marcus Webley told me to wait. Let's get the full picture before he knows you're looking. So I did. 2 weeks of walking into my own shop, looking Derek in the eye, making small talk about contract schedules, while knowing exactly what he'd been doing. 2 weeks of swallowing something that tasted like battery acid every time he called me cuz. Then Derek forced the issue himself. He walked in on a Friday afternoon, cocky as ever, and dropped an invoice on my desk. A $14,000 emergency parts order from a company called Gulf Coast Industrial Solutions. I looked at the invoice. The address was a P.O. box in Hitchcock. The company had no web presence. I'd already checked. Derek, what exactly are we ordering from Gulf Coast Industrial Solutions? Injector assemblies. For the Hollis contract boats. You want me to handle it or not? I called Hollis's fleet manager this morning. They haven't requested any injector work. His face shifted. Just for a second. Something behind the eyes recalculating. Then the mask slid back on. Must be a miscommunication. I'll sort it out Monday. No. Sit down. What's your problem, man? My problem is that $194,600 is missing from my operating account, Derek. My problem is you added yourself as a signatory without my knowledge. My problem is that every dollar traces back to an account in your mother's name. He went quiet, looked at the floor, looked at the wall. Then he looked straight at me, and he didn't deny a single thing. He justified it. You'd still be turning wrenches in someone else's shop if Uncle Ray hadn't introduced you to Captain Hollis. So really, this was never just yours. I sat there for a full 10 seconds. 9 years of 5 a.m. starts. Rebuilding engines with busted knuckles in July heat that would drop a normal person. Maxing out credit cards to make payroll during hurricane season when offshore work shut down for weeks. Sleeping in my truck at the yard because I couldn't afford the gas to drive home and back. And Derek reduced all of it to one introduction at a crawfish boil. I stood up. Leave your keys on the desk. You're terminated. Don't come back to this property. He laughed. Actually laughed. Said I was overreacting. Said Aunt Lorraine warned him this would happen. That success had made me forget where I came from. I called Marcus Webley within the hour. By Monday morning, a forensic accountant was pulling 14 months of records from every account tied to the business. Priya became the backbone of the case. She'd already built a spreadsheet tracking every suspicious transfer. Dates, amounts, fake vendor names, the receiving account. She voluntarily sat for a 4-hour deposition and gave the forensic accountant organized records that cut the audit timeline in half. When I thanked her, she just shook her head and said, "I've seen what you put into this place. Nobody gets to take that from you." Then she got serious. Check your insurance policies. If Derek had access to the account, check what else he had access to. That sentence kept me up for 2 nights straight. That same evening, my phone rang. Aunt Lorraine. I answered because part of me, some stupid part that still believed in family, thought maybe she was calling to explain. Maybe Derek had acted alone. Maybe she didn't know. She knew. She didn't call to apologize. She called to threaten. She said if I didn't drop this and make it right with the family, she'd make sure every person in Galveston County knew I was the kind of man who puts family in prison over money. Marcus Webley brought in a forensic accountant named Dana Holt. She spent 3 weeks reconstructing the full trail, and what she found was worse than anything I'd prepared myself for. Derek had forged my signature on the signatory addition form at Moody National Bank. Not a sloppy forgery either. He'd practiced it. A handwriting analyst Marcus hired confirmed it wasn't my hand. Over 14 months, Derek made 47 separate transfers, totaling $194,600. Every one routed to an account held solely in Lorraine's name at a completely different branch across town. Bank surveillance footage from 6 different dates showed Derek walking in and making cash withdrawals between $3,000 and $9,000 each time. Withdrawals he'd already pre-coded in my system as vendor payments before he even left the shop. Lorraine's deposits matched his withdrawals almost to the dollar and the date. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Dana also found that Derek had been inflating fuel receipts and pocketing the difference. Another $6,200 he apparently kept for himself, separate from what went to his mother. But the thing that made Marcus lean back in his chair and say, "We've got him," was a text thread recovered from Derek's phone through a subpoena. Lorraine coaching him, message after message. Just keep it under 10 so it doesn't flag. And then the one that still sits in my chest like a stone. Ray would have wanted this. Ray, my uncle who shook my hand at every family gathering and told me he was proud of what I was building. They used a dead man's name to justify robbing me. While we built the case, Lorraine launched her campaign. She called my mother, my sister, 3 of my uncles, both my grandparents. She had a whole narrative ready. I'd gotten rich off Uncle Ray's name and connections. I'd refused to share with the family that made me. Now I was trying to destroy Derek's life over what she called a misunderstanding about shared money. She organized a family meeting at her house. I wasn't invited. My mother called me afterward. She was upset and confused. Lorraine says you're pressing charges over a loan Derek took. She says you agreed to it. I never agreed to anything. There was no loan. There was no conversation. There was nothing but forged signatures and fake invoices and a cousin who looked me in the face every morning for over a year while he bled my account dry. My mom believed me, but half the extended family didn't. My Uncle Curtis called me that same week and told me flat out, family doesn't sue family. You handle this at the kitchen table, not in court. I asked him if he'd say the same thing if someone stole $194,600 from his welding shop. He hung up. Derek was out on bond and running his mouth all over Texas City, telling people my business was basically built on charity and that he was just correcting an imbalance. Zero remorse, not a flicker. Lorraine even tried to contact Captain Hollis directly, trying to poison that business relationship. Hollis shut her down on the spot and called me 20 minutes later to warn me. Marcus Webley's strategy was surgical. He didn't engage with the family drama. Not one word. He went straight through the legal system. He filed theft by fiduciary charges through Galveston County District Court, felony. He filed a separate civil suit for full restitution plus damages. But the key move, the one that changed everything, was when Marcus requested that the DA's office subpoena Lorraine's bank records. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. If Lorraine knowingly received stolen funds and helped orchestrate the scheme, she was exposed to conspiracy charges. Marcus looked at me across his desk and said, "They're banking on you folding under family pressure. We're going to show them that pressure has no jurisdiction in a courtroom." And then there was Hollis. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very man whose introduction supposedly entitled the family to my money stepped up as a character witness. He provided a written statement to Marcus. He said he'd introduced hundreds of people over 30 years of working the Galveston waterfront. The introduction was a handshake, not an investment. His exact words in that statement still mean more to me than almost anything anyone has said. That boy earned every contract through his own work. Ray would be ashamed of what his wife and son have done. Hollis also kept every one of his fleet contracts with my shop. That was a signal to the rest of the maritime community that my business was solid. That mattered more than he probably knew. When the DA's office served the subpoena on Lorraine's bank records, she called me one last time. She wasn't angry anymore. Her voice was small and shaky, in a way I'd never heard from her. "You don't know what you're doing to this family," she whispered. I sat in my truck in the yard parking lot, looked out at the shop I'd built with 9 years of my life, and said, "No, Lorraine, you don't know what you did to mine." The case moved faster than anyone expected. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. 47 transfers, forged signatures, surveillance footage, and a text thread where Lorraine practically wrote an instruction manual for stealing from her own nephew. Derek's attorney told him to take a deal, and for once in his life, Derek listened to someone giving him good advice. In Galveston County District Court, Derek pled guilty to felony theft by a fiduciary. Second-degree felony in Texas carries up to 20 years. The judge looked at Derek for a long time before she spoke. She noted the breach of family trust. She noted the calculated nature of the scheme. She noted that it wasn't impulsive, wasn't desperate, wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was 14 months of deliberate, systematic theft from a man who'd given him a job when no one else would. 5 years probated, mandatory restitution. Derek stood there in a borrowed suit and nodded like he was agreeing to return a borrowed lawnmower. But the real moment happened in the hallway outside the courtroom. Lorraine was sitting on a wooden bench, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She'd been charged separately, conspiracy to commit theft. Her own attorney had told her the text messages were indefensible. She was staring at the floor when my mother walked up to her. My mom didn't shout. She never shouts. She just stood there until Lorraine looked up. "Ray loved that boy," she said, meaning me. "He told me once he was proud of what he was building. You took Ray's name and used it to justify stealing from his nephew. Don't you ever invoke my brother's memory again." Lorraine said nothing, not one word. Derek caught me outside the courthouse as I was walking to my truck. He jogged up like we were leaving a barbecue together. "I know you're mad, but this didn't have to go this far. We could have worked something out." I stopped, looked at him, really looked at him. "You had a salary. You had benefits. You had a chance I didn't owe you. And you stole from me for 14 months while looking me in the eye every single day. There's nothing to work out." His attorney pulled him away by the elbow. That was the last time we spoke. Lorraine pled no contest to a reduced conspiracy charge, 2 years probation, and a civil judgment that put a lien on her house. Between court-ordered restitution and the civil lien, I recovered $131,000 of the $194,600. The remaining $63,600 was gone, spent on Lorraine's car payments, Derek's credit card debt, and cash that simply evaporated into wherever stolen money goes when people spend it faster than they can steal it. My business took a hit. I had to dip into a line of credit to cover operating costs during the investigation. 2 contracts stalled while clients waited to see if the shop was stable. But Priya kept the books airtight, and within 8 months, the reserves were climbing back. 6 months after sentencing, my mother arranged a phone call with Derek. Not for Derek's sake, for hers. She wanted the poison out of the family. Derek said he was sorry, said Lorraine had convinced him it was right, and that he got in too deep to stop. I listened. I told him I didn't wish him harm, but that trust was gone, and there was no path back to what we'd had. I hope you figure your life out, Derek, but you'll do it away from me and away from my business. He accepted that. Whether he meant it, I couldn't say. I restructured everything. Dual authorization on all accounts. No single person could move money without a cosign. I promoted Priya to operations manager with a raise she'd earned 10 times over. Hired a full-time office administrator to handle vendor relations so I could get back to what I actually do best, fixing engines. Captain Hollis referred 2 new fleet operators to the shop that year. By the end of the following year, operating reserves climbed past $300,000, higher than before the theft. I also started mentoring 2 younger mechanics through a Galveston Maritime Trades program. Kids from families like mine. I told them something I wish someone had told me. An introduction might open a door, but nobody carries you through it. Don't ever let someone reduce 9 years of your work to 1 minute of someone else's. The family fractured. I won't sugarcoat that. Thanksgiving is smaller now. Some cousins still think I went too far. Uncle Curtis still won't return my calls. But the ones who stayed, my mom, my sister, the people who saw what I built and respected it, they're enough. I didn't press charges to prove a point. I pressed charges because a crime happened. Blood doesn't make theft a gift. An introduction doesn't make someone your investor. My name is on that shop. It always was.